Good morning. I'm Pastor Cary. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here this morning. We're going to finish up our fourth and final message on the book of Job called Fire and Rain. We're going to read the entire last passage. So if you have a Bible or Bible app, we're going to be in the entire chapter of the book of Job, the last chapter, 42. What we're working on today, last week we talked about avoiding reality, which is this concept of, and we've been going through the stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief. It's this concept of where there's 5 stages. The 4th stage is the scariest. The 5th stage has also got some fear factor to it. But the 4th stage, the depression stage, is the scariest one. It's where you have the very intense sadness that causes the very ugly cry. The kind of cry that makes you wail and moan, that makes you do and look and feel things you spend most of your time trying to avoid. And it's when you can face that reality, you can then begin the part of healing. Well, then the final stage is acceptance. And it's this concept that Louise already mentioned. Your life's changed. How are you going to pick up these pieces and learn to live this new version of yourself? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Last week was avoiding reality. Today is accepting reality. If you are new with us, we've been going through the book of Job. If you're not familiar with the book of Job, this guy goes through the ringer. He has it worse than probably anybody in human history. I've yet to meet somebody that has gone through as much tragedy as Job goes through, basically in 1 week. He loses his entire wealth, which is in his livestock. He loses all of his children. He had 10. And then he loses his health. He gets these insanely painful blisters all over his body. Then his friends come to comfort him, and it turns out they're really bad at it. That they start accusing him of, hey, this is happening to you because you clearly made God mad. You need to stop whatever it is you did against him and repent. And probably your kids did something evil too. And so literally salt poured on his multiple wounds are his friends. Last week we talked about God shows up, comes in a hurricane or a tornado and talks to Job. And God doesn't really give him any of the answers he was looking for. But God drills him with 70 questions, just peppers him with questions to help Job wake up and realize, buddy, you're just focused on all the wrong things. You might want to refocus. And that's where we pick up this story. And he is instantly humbled. I want to talk about a time where I was instantly humbled by God. It was a very minor time. We're going to dial down the intensity to real minimal. I'm 16 years old. I'm just now learning how to have a relationship with Jesus. I had been a high school party guy. I have done a lot of things the Bible says do not do. I did them out of rebellion to mom, dad, church. All the adults that I was angry at, if they told me don't do it, I was doing it. And I hid it pretty well. But I'm now finally surrendering my life to Jesus. I'm now saying I want to live for him. I don't want to live for myself. I want to know him better than I've ever understood. I clearly had this problem where I saw Jesus as a religion, not as a person. And so I'm making, by his grace, all of these changes. And lots of good has come. But now I'm entering the stage where, hey, you're letting a lot of bad things happen to me that I don't deserve. For whatever reason, other than maybe the enemy was upset that I had flipped teams. I am now starting to get grounded for every little piddly thing my parents had. Like, it was insane how much I started to get in trouble when I was no longer doing things that should get a kid in trouble. Like, I was breaking laws just a few months ago. Now I'm no longer doing any of these things, and I'm getting grounded left and right. I'm getting suspended in school for one of the dumbest things that have ever happened to a teenager. I took from the hotel room on a school trip a tiny, tiny little coffee pot, and I put it in my bag. And when I was questioned about it, I admitted it, and I gave the coffee pot back. And then I was suspended for 3 days. Bit extreme in my book, not according to my dad, wasn't enough. So I'm grounded for a month. Because dear old dad has high standards. Kids don't know how good you have it. Anyway, yeah, part of the reason Danielle and I's first date didn't happen in February was because I was grounded for 4 weeks. Anyway, I digress. The point that I'm trying to make is I then, out of frustration, one late night, parents are asleep, I go out to the back deck, and I'm just having it out with God. I'm angry. I'm upset. God, I got in way less trouble when I was doing everything wrong, and now all of a sudden I'm in trouble every stinking week. And I have no life. I don't get to see my friends. I don't get to go out on dates. What is happening? And then I hear the leaves just start to rustle up. There's a lot of trees. I hear all these leaves start to rustle up. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then I don't remember what the other noise was, but you start to feel the breeze, and then bang, this loud, crazy noise. And I hit the deck. I literally hit the deck. And I go, I'm sorry. And then it clues into me, it was the ancient 1970s air conditioner compressor underneath the deck that had just kicked on. But I was instantly humbled. Like, okay, maybe you don't talk to God that way when you're upset. Maybe you treat him like an adult too, like you want to be treated. This is what has happened to Job in a much more significant and empowering way. He is being talked to by a tornado. So it's been real intense, and so we're going to read how this changed him immediately. But the main point that I want you guys to be thinking about as we read the entire chapter of Job, chapter 42, is experiencing tragedies forever changes you. Resisting this truth like we tend to do just makes the suffering last longer. So let's get to Job 42 and let's read it together. It's a long chapter, so I won't make you stand, but I do want you to honor the reading of God's word in your heart. Job chapter 42, verse 1. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this who conceals my counsel with ignorance? Surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak, and when I question you, you will inform me. I had heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I reject my words, and I am sorry for them. I am dust and ashes. Therefore the Lord had finished speaking to Job. He said to Eliphaz the Temanite, this is one of his 3 friends that scolded him so much. He says, I am angry with you and your 2 friends. You have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. Now, take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. Then my servant Job will pray for you, and I will surely accept his prayer and not deal with you as your folly deserves. For you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. Man, I was doing good until I got there. Went and did as the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. And after Job prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and doubled his previous possessions. All his brothers, sisters, and former acquaintances came to him and dined with him at his house. They sympathized with him and comforted him concerning the adversity the Lord had brought on him. Each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold earring. So the Lord blessed the last part of Job's life more than the first. He owned 14,000 sheep and goats, 6,000 camels, and 1,000 yoke of oxen and 1,000 female donkeys. I'm just going to pause here for a second. That's literally double what he had in Job chapter 1. Verse 13, he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He named the first daughter Jemima, thank you. His second, Keziah, and third, Kareen Hapuk. No women were as beautiful as Job's daughters could be found in the land, and their father granted them an inheritance with their brothers, which is extremely rare back then. Job lived 140 years after he saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. Then Job died old and full of days. So as you can see here, it's tempting to look at this story and go, oh, wow, and they all lived happily ever after. No, I need to remind you, 10 of them did not live. There is no happily ever after, except they probably went on to be with the Lord very, very far away from Job and his wife. So that's not the story here. The point of the message is not, oh, everything came to him double, all the prosperity returned, yay, hooray, everything goes back to normal and is even better than normal. That is not the point here. It's tempting to do that because we're super American when we read the Bible. I need you to think a little more Jewish when you read the Bible. He has gone through the ringer and everything has changed. And so that brings me to the very first point that I want to talk about is the first thing that has changed is he's given up the wrestling match that he was having with God, with himself, especially with guilt. And when I think about you and I, when we mourn the loss of folks that are near and dear to us, or we mourn the loss of being fired from a job unfairly, or we mourn the loss of a friend totally bailing and betraying on you that in a totally evil way, or we mourn the loss of somebody we trusted completely wrecked us and let us down. When we mourn these powerful things, it's tempting to want to wrestle to put your life back together the way it was before it happened, and it's just not possible. Job's relationship with his 10 new children are nothing like the relationship he had with his 10 previous children. Everything is different. And so what you and I have to wrestle with, get to the grips of, and what I mentioned earlier is we love staying in the first 3 stages of grief, which are known as denial, anger, and bargaining. And it's this idea that if I just wrestle enough, if I grab the pieces of my broken heart, I can put it back together the way it was before all of this hit me. And what we see with Job when he gets his encounter with God, his instant humility of, oh, I'm completely off here. I really have no clue what has happened to me. I really have no clue what's happening in the universe that would cause God to say this is good. But these are the things that have happened to me. And I cannot go back and change that. So he now accepts the reality that God had reasons for Job to go through this, and that he will not know those reasons, and that is okay. That my life is now forever changed because God has declared your life now is forever changed. And instead of trying to wrestle with his friends about how this is unfair, instead of trying to wrestle with his guilt that if I move on, maybe that treats my lost children as something worse than a dad should treat them in their memory, he accepts the reality of, no, that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is God has called me to this part of the journey, and I have to go. And that's what stage 5 is. After depression, you hit acceptance. And acceptance is not, I'm okay with everything that has happened to me and I now feel good about it. That is not acceptance. Acceptance is, my heart is shattered on the ground. It will take time for me to put these pieces together with God's grace and help from the friends that He has given me, the family that He's given me. That's what I like about this chapter is it talks about how A, his friends needed to get back on board of being good people, and B, his family starts showing up again. He doesn't do any of this alone. He does this all with God, with family, with friends. It's now letting people back into your life to say, I don't know where to go from here, but I accept I'm supposed to go somewhere. Will you help me? That's what acceptance is, and that's what a lot of us are avoiding because so many of us are such self-made people, such good people, such well-adjusted, smart, educated people. We're just so used to being able to figure out these mysteries. And we take a lot of pride in that. Not in a sinful way, but in a, hey, you're good at what you do. You can trust some of the decisions you make, but you're now in territory you have never been in. And so that's why I love Job's response to God where he realizes, oh, I've just said so many things that are not true. All this arguing that I did with my friends, it's clear I just don't know what's going on. You see, when you and I go through an incredible train wreck of a tragedy, whatever it may be, even you students, as young as you are, you go through such hard things. Heck, even back then, a breakup is so rough. You go through these hard, powerful things that make you want to cry. And what it causes you to do is it just causes you to take all of your focus and bring it completely inward. And you try to shut out everything around you. And you see this with Job. Job in the previous chapters is arguing with his friends so much. It's become so much about him, so much about how he feels, so much about how this has been unfair, so much how he didn't deserve this. God shows up and says, hey, can you take that look and focus off of that single tree and begin to look at the forest that's been around you this entire time again? Can you please stop looking at your one horrible tragedy and just step back? It seems like God's being a little mean, a little rough, maybe some tough love, we could say. Those of us who are guys raised by a dad, you know what tough love is. It's still love. And what God is graciously doing for Job is saying, buddy, I love you, but you really just need to stop talking. Son, you are good at so many things, but right now you're just sounding like a moron. And I just need you to be quiet. I don't know if your dad's ever lovingly told you to shut up before. I know mine did multiple times. And I often wonder, would Dad tell me to shut up right now? Maybe. Now I'm old enough to where I sometimes have to go to Dad and say, hey, do you mind laying off your political thoughts on Facebook and just maybe watch a baseball game again? You were way cooler back then. So that's what me and my brother do now. Hey, Dad, zip it on whatever you've been watching Fox News. You're not helping. So again, anytime we go through these things, we have to come to a point where we give up trying to wrestle life back to normal. There is no back to normal. There is forward to whatever the new normal will be, which is a brand new version of yourself that you will have to take time to get used to. But there's still good there. I think that's the big message here is whatever the new normal God is calling you to, there is still great good to be had. I love that it talks about Job lives this very long life and he gets to see a fourth generation of his kids. That's wild to me. Totally different than what his life was before. We've talked about here previously, I know Job would have rather had his 10 kids with him, but all of these kids and grandkids and great-grandkids here too, that's good living. And I'm sure he's thankful. And it's tempting to feel guilty to appreciate that as if that's somehow saying, oh, I didn't love those 10 children like I did. That's not what's happening here. Their memory, all that good, goes with him into the future with these generations. The way he fathers the next 10 probably is very directly impacted by the way those 10 children made an impact on him. So all of this comes forward, and there is no saying, as I move forward, I'm saying goodbye, I didn't love you as much. And I need you and I to understand this guilt well. It is evil. The amount of time it takes you to grieve for someone you've lost does not necessarily equal the amount of love that you had for that person. So you've got to be okay with, I'm moving forward, your memory comes with me. It's sad to say bye to that, but I gotta go. And let's be honest, all of these folks that look down, or however it works in heaven, I honestly don't know. I assume Jesus tells them things. They're outside of space and time. I don't really understand how physics works, but anyway, I'm sure they're somewhere going, yay. They're picking up the pieces and they're turning into something new, and it's just as beautiful as it was, but it's totally different. But those folks cheer us on, yes, go find what's new in this life. Without me, but with my memory. And it's okay to not be okay with that plan. That's totally normal. And I don't see God giving Job any guilt trips about how he felt. You see throughout this passage, especially when talking to the three friends, he says very clearly to the three friends, Job has spoken truth about me. So you don't see God getting onto him for, darn it, Job, you should have felt better about all that I did to you. Job, you should have cried less and you should have been angry less. You don't see any of that from God. You see God saying, hey, you're running your mouth too much and you're not thinking enough. But everything else you've kind of been dealing with emotionally, you did fine. And in a lot of ways, you were right. So I hope that gives you and I some permission to just have all these feels that are uncomfortable. And I hope, Living Oaks Church, you've learned, especially from the three idiot friends, what not to do when you see people having all these feelings. I hope you learn, just be quiet and agree. That's what God did to Job. That's what their three friends started off doing for 1 week and then got real dumb real fast. But that 1 week, they were great friends. But focus in on, man, I see somebody hurting. I'm just going to be close. I'm just going to let them say whatever it is they need to say. And I'm not going to tell them they're wrong on what they say. If anything, I'm going to say, yeah, you're probably right. I've told you guys before, when I've been going through this, there's a lot of times where I find myself cussing a lot more, which I do feel bad about, and I do ask God to help. But I cuss a lot more. And then I find myself saying extreme things that are not true, but I just need to say them because I'm so upset. And a lot of it is, I just hate everything. I hate you, saying you're cool, everybody else I hate. And I just need to say those things. Couldn't tell you why. I just do. And when I say it, I feel better. Yeah, sorry. I told you it doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow a logical train. I just need to hate some people. And then I get over it. And I know it's all wrong. I don't need somebody to tell me that. I know. Just right now, as I'm hurting, I want to hurt something back. And so in my mind, I'm doing like, you remember that old sketch from Children in the Hall? Kids in the Hall? Where you would just smash faces that walk by and would take extreme pleasure out of that? If not, I'll share the video with you sometime. One of the big things that God commands him to do next, though, is a big deal, and I think it is important. It's to forgive those who hurt you. We established in week 1, you never have to forgive Satan. You can hate him all the way through eternity. He is terrible, and we look forward to when he goes to hell. A reminder, Satan doesn't run hell. Hell was built for him to suffer. It's a day I look forward to. It's in the Bible. We know in Revelation, I think it's 19, what happens to dear old Satan. He gets kicked in the teeth by Jesus, and it's not even a fair fight. It's not even close. It's a curb stomp. And I love it. And often when I feel bad, I read that for a little bit of joy. But you do have to forgive others. Number one, you have to forgive God. You see Job do this right away. God has done nothing wrong. God does nothing wrong. But Job is upset with God. And he says flat out in those first verses, clearly, God, I didn't know what I was saying. And I retract everything I said about you. He says, I repent in dust and ash. Meaning, not only do I regret ever saying that about you, I will never say that about you again. I am dead as far as believing this is all you being evil towards me. Next thing that God makes him do is forgive his idiot friends who spoke so horribly about him. Those of you that have gone through really hard times, and we talked about this last week, which the video posted today, there's some really just good-hearted people that say the wrong things when you're going through this. They say it to try to make you feel better, and sometimes I wonder if it's selfish why they're trying to make you feel better, because they don't like you being sad because it brings them down. But some people genuinely think, oh, if I tell you this, you'll feel good about this situation. And so last week I went through a whole list of what not to say from people who I have mourned the loss of their relatives with. They gave me the list. Wonderful people. People from my chamber, people from my previous church, people from 3 churches ago. They gave us a list of what not to say. One of those being, God never gives you more than you can handle. That is just one, not a Bible verse. Okay? So God never said that. So don't say it. Okay? As if he did. God often gives us more than you can handle. Look at the story of Job. Losing 10 children at the same time is way more than Job could handle. There is nobody on the face of the earth that can handle that. So, sometimes you're going to have to forgive a very good-hearted person for saying a very thoughtless thing. But do it. Sometimes you're going to have to forgive. What I think is hard is when you go through these deep, powerful tragedies and you're very much in the thick of mourning and grieving and wrestling these feelings, and you watch everybody else go back to their life so easily. And you don't get to go back so easily. And it's tempting to get mad at them for having a life that's normal still. And it's tempting to be annoyed that they can get back to it so easily and you can't. You need to forgive them. They need to do that. They're not where you are in sadness. So they need to keep their lives going too, and you need to let that go. That's not against you. That's not them forgetting about you. More than anything, you probably told them, you're fine, I'm fine, you don't need to worry about me. Go on about your life and week. And they did. They did exactly what you told them to do. You told them get away and go back to normal, and they did that for you. So don't feel bad that you now realize you can't jump into that mode like they can. If anything, be thankful something is normal. So that brings me to the third point. Moving into the new. You've got to find a new version of you now. We see this with Job. Job gets back to work, gets all of this livestock back and doubles it. He's now smarter than he was before, wiser than he was before. So that's apparently was his step one, was just get back to work. Find something for your hands and feet to do. My comfort circle group that I still go to at Heights to deal with my grieving is so interesting because most of those folks are retirees. And so they don't have a day job to go to. I at least had a day job, and that did help when I was going through my grief, was I learned a whole new career. So I was easily distracted about stuff. But for my retiree friends, it was very hard, and a lot of it is wrestling with, what do you do now? Your whole life was around this one individual being there, and now they're not there, and now there's a whole bunch of things they did that you have to learn how to do. And then there's a whole bunch of things you used to always do that you cannot do now because the person's just not there. So what do you do? Two of my dearest friends there have picked up playing the recorder as their instrument of choice because it's easy. And they have a whole team at the senior center playing that eclectic sound of plastic whistles. Good for them. I'm excited. Probably won't visit, but I'm excited for them. But I love the idea that they took on something totally out of their ordinary. For me, when I went through it and there was something new for me to learn, I put up a whole new lighting and fan system in my back porch and learned how to do electrical work on the fly and didn't burn the house down. Yeah, pretty proud of that porch. I know others have taken on just a new anything that just gives them something that gives them interest. And so I like this concept of part of the new you is going to be pick up a skill that you never had before, pick up a talent that you never had before. What I really did was I buried myself in my Toastmasters club. I just started going there because they met at my office, and so, yeah, let's just go there. And I learned how to be better at public speaking, which I hope you enjoy now. But I mainly learned how to talk about this stuff in front of people again. And shout out to my Toastmasters friends who are here. The big thing is you see, not only does he move into new tasks, he also moves into new people. He has new children, new grandchildren, great-grandchildren, more friends, family, just moves more into public. New relationships that feed his soul a little bit, and he feeds their souls as well. As you explore, what do I need to do different? It's probably going to be new people is what needs to be a part of your life. And that's okay. Maybe you move locations, move out of a house, move to a new neighborhood. I don't know. For me, it was a whole new job, whole new career, all sorts of new people. Now it's a new church. But it's just be okay with nothing is like what it was however many years ago before the tragedy. That's fine. Just go for it. Just move into it, see where it goes, and be okay with that it's awkward at first, doesn't feel comfortable at first, but if you practice it like practicing any other skill, you will eventually find this is good. But you have to be patient with you, not being good at things for a while. Are you okay with that? Are you okay that you're not an expert at this? You're not an expert at grieving. You're not an expert at being able to pick the pieces of your shattered heart back together. That's okay. Be patient that for months and years, this just won't feel right. That's normal as all get out. So embrace that reality. And you might say, oh, that's easy to say or whatever. Sure, I get that. I just want you to know that our God understands that too. Christ knows the journey of grief very well. If you guys will open your Bibles back up to Matthew chapter 14. And I want you to see, Jesus is not leading us into things he himself has not been willing to go. One of the things that I think we often forget is Jesus had family too. Had brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, mom, dad. He was very much a normal human being in a ton of ways. The only thing abnormal is, he just wouldn't disobey God one single time. But if you're familiar with the history of Jesus, you know his cousin is John the Baptist, and very much in the thick of his ministry, those 3 years where he changed the world forever, his cousin is brutally murdered. John the Baptist upsets a very powerful, politically influential person in Israel. And for whatever reason, that lady tells another guy, hey, do you mind just cutting his head off for me? And because she was pretty, that guy said, okay. So John the Baptist is beheaded, and this is what happens. Matthew 14, 12 through 15. Then the disciples, these are John's disciples, came and removed the corpse and buried it and went and reported to Jesus. When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. And as he stepped ashore, he saw the huge crowd and felt compassion on them. He began to heal their sick. When the evening came, the disciples approached him and said, this place is a wilderness, and it's already late. Send the crowds away so they can go into the village and buy food for themselves. So Jesus loses his cousin who is very close to him. Same age. Their stories are very intertwined together if you read the very first 2 chapters of Matthew. Loses his cousin. He withdraws, gets on a boat, gets in the middle of a lake. It's just him, the water, no one else. And he has his time where he grieves. Then he gets to the other shore, and it turns out there's work to be done. He grieves kind of fast. I want you to see he's not a normal human being like you and I. I think you and I have to wrestle. Apparently, Jesus doesn't have to wrestle with loss. But he just goes, there's things to be done. And you'll see he feeds 5,000 people miraculously. And it's funny that they say, Jesus, you went to the weirdest, wild, why did you come here? There's so many people here. We got to send them away. There's nothing around here. And it was clearly Jesus just wanted to be alone. But there was good work to be done. And so he went and did the good work. Now, I bring this all up to really ask you this question. Christ has done so much to know what it's like to be you and I. I think that causes the next question, have you and I returned the favor to him? If he's so willing to go to this depth, to leave heaven, come to earth, go through the suffering that you and I go through the pain and agony of tragedies and losses that you and I have gone through, have we put forth any kind of effort to know him back in the ways he's trying to know us? And this is what I was implying at the beginning when I was telling you my story as a 16-year-old. I went so long thinking Jesus is just a religion, not a person who wants to be known. That's why we picked up the passage that Louise read in Philippians 3, where Paul says so brilliantly that he just wants to know Jesus, wants to know him in all his power, wants to know him also in his sufferings, wants to know the full totality of this God who became man. So the question you and I need to be asking ourselves is, do we want to know him this way? Do we want to be with him like he wants to be with us? And so what we do here at Living Oaks Church to recognize that and honor that is we do communion every week. Communion is a fancy way to say we want to have fellowship, company with our God. So that's what we're going to turn our attention to now.